I caught the survivors and impaled them on stakes in front of their towns. Pillars of skulls I erected in front of the town. I fed their corpses, cut into small pieces, to dogs, pigs, and vultures. I slowly tore off his skin. Of some I cut off the hands and limbs, of others the noses, ears, and arms. Of many soldiers I put out the eyes. I flayed them and covered their skins, and covered with their skins the wall of the town. End quote. Lots of they like competed with each other, the way that Egyptian kings competed with each other on the size of the pyramid they could afford. These kings competed with each other on the brutalness of their conquests. As a result, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, Nineveh, was hated and despised. Continuing, ending the Assyrian quote. Other ancient kings played rough too, but without quite such fiendish gusto. Most Egyptian and Babylonian kings preferred to boast of their justice, piety, and public works, rather than of their cruelties and atrocities. Just pause for just a second and say that whereas the Assyrians were one moved from the Egyptians and Babylonians and stuff more brutal, the Egyptians and Babylonians and so forth are one removed more brutal than the Greeks, who were even more careful and respectful of human life. Continuing. There is, however, another side to the Assyrians. They were gifted and energetic inventors and engineers. Some of their inventions stemmed from their militarism. For, despite the harm that it does in other directions, war certainly stimulates technology. Thus, the Assyrians were the first to equip armies with weapons of iron in about the 8th century BC. Iron had been known for 7 or 8 centuries, but for several centuries it was too precious for mass armament. Now, bronze was still very much in use 400 or 500 years later when the Greeks fought the Persians. So, go figure that one out. The Assyrians also developed remarkable new wheeled war machines. The wheel had already been known for several thousand years. There's a picture of a chariot on a Mesopotamian vase that may have been painted before 4000 BC. In the 1920s, Sir Leonard Woolley excavated the grave of the Sumerian king Abargi of Ur, A-B-A-R-G-I of Ur, about 2500 BC. In the tomb, Woolley found, along with the skeletons of 65 attendants slain to serve the king in the next world, the remains of 2 wagons from 2500 BC. So get this. Now we're going to talk about, if this is dry, you should not be watching this video series, because this is good stuff right here. It's going to talk about these wagons that they found in a tomb 4,500 years ago. Each wagon was drawn by 3 oxen, which had been killed with the attendants. Each wagon had 4 wheels, as did the war chariots shown on an inlaid panel found in the same tomb. 4 wheels on the chariots. As the horse had not yet been tamed, each chariot was drawn by a pair of onagers, that is, Asiatic asses. This animal, however, did not prove well suited to domestication. Hence the modern domestic ass is descended from the smaller African species. The wheels of these vehicles were solid, built up of 2 semicircles of wood fastened together. To protect the rim from wear, they probably had tires of leather straps through which large-headed copper nails were driven. Much later, in Assyrian times, tires of copper or bronze came into use, and still later, iron tires. In this particular set of wagons, the axle was fixed to the vehicle, and the wheels rotated loosely and independently on the axle. They believe maybe some of the earlier versions, the wheel and axle was pinned together, because they think the wheel might have evolved from just the roller, just a log that you roll something on, and then they're like, let's cut that, put an axle on it. Anyways, these ones had fixed axles and the wheel just rotated on it. That's friction. In Abargi's 4-wheeled wagons and chariots, both axles were rigidly fastened to the body. Neither axle was pivoted, as is the front axle of any modern wagon, so that it can follow the team around corners. Therefore, these vehicles had to be manhandled around turns. Moreover, as anybody who has pushed a baby carriage knows, a four-wheeled vehicle with fixed axles tends to zigzag. Now, if they're not exactly perfectly aligned, the two axles, if you have them quite misaligned, it would turn in quite a circle all the time. So any deviation from having exactly perfect alignment would tend to make it travel off to one side or the other. I don't even, maybe they were just ceremonial vehicles. Maybe they weren't even useful except to bury with kings and stuff, It doesn't seem like it'd be that useful if you couldn't turn it. Continuing, to make a wagon turn easily, as the draft animals draw it round a bend, the front axle must be pivoted on a king bolt. This improvement, however, took a long time, perhaps 20 or 30 centuries. In the days of the Persian Empire, a four-wheeled carriage called a harmanaxa came into use. It may possibly have had a pivoted front axle. But even after this mechanism was known, four-wheeled vehicles long remained rare. The simpler two-wheeled carts and chariots were more commonly used throughout ancient times. A shortcoming of ancient four-wheelers was that even after they had pivoted front axles, their front wheels were made as large as the rear ones. Therefore, they could not turn sharply, because if they tried to do so, their front wheels scraped against the sides of their bodies. The Assyrians also exploited the wheel by inventing the belfry, or helepolis, or movable siege tower. Fierce fighters though the Assyrians were, climbing a scaling ladder was always desperate business. There was an excellent chance that the defenders would either drop a heavy stone or a beam on the attacker, or push the ladder over backwards. Therefore, some clever Assyrian engineers fixed the ladder to a wooden framework, too heavy to be pushed over, and put wheels under the framework. As the defenders could still pepper the attackers with arrows and other missiles, the next step was to board up the sides and the front. Untanned hides, which are really tough and hard, were nailed to the structure to keep it from being set afire. The resulting wheeled tower, or belfry, remained a standard siege engine for over 2,000 years until cannon made lofty walls useless for defense. A further Assyrian improvement was to combine the belfry with a battering ram. A tree trunk was shod on one end with a mass of metal and hung by chains from the roof of a shed on wheels called a tortoise. The fully developed Assyrian belfry had 6 wheels and a ram working through a hole in the front. Over the forward part of the tortoise rose the tower, as high as the wall to be attacked. During the approach, archers on the tower tried to clear the wall of defenders so that the attackers could scale it in safety. In several lively bas-reliefs, the defenders shower the belfry with torches, while a man in the tower hastily puts out the fires by pouring water on them from a dipper. Sometimes, instead of a ram, the belfry was equipped with a boar. This was like a ram, except that it had a sharp spear-like head. In attacking a wall of soft mud brick, such a tool might be more useful than a ram. The Assyrians also exploited a new military arm, horse cavalry. Around 2000 BC or earlier, on the great grassy plains that stretch from Poland to Turkestan, a wandering tribe of cattle-raising nomads tamed the most important of man's working animals. This was the horse, which then ran wild from the forests of Germany to the deserts of Mongolia. This feat of domesticating the horse had momentous results. The horse tamers set out in their rattling chariots and easily conquered their neighbors. They imposed their language upon their subjects and intermarried with them. These mixed peoples set out in their turn and conquered more neighboring nations. Thus the horsemen spread their speech from Portugal to Bengal. The family of tongues derived from that of the original horsemen is called the Indo-European. The horsemen who conquered Iran and India called themselves Arya, A-R-Y-A, noble ones. Therefore, the original conquerors and their descendants are sometimes called Indo-Europeans and sometimes Aryans. However, there is no Aryan race. Whatever the race of the first horseman, it has long since disappeared by intermarriage and dilution. The words for certain plants and animals, common to widely separated Indo-European languages, suggest that the original point of dispersion was south of the Baltic Sea, that is, on the plains of Poland. Very near Germany, so the people who